Hi, this is Walt with Raybuck Auto Body Parts. Welcome back to our channel. Today we're continuing with our 6-speed Magnum transmission swap, and today we are talking about parts. Everything that I've been using in this swap to go from basically an automatic transmission to a 6-speed. So let's start by looking at the transmission. Tranny is, as we said, a Tremec Magnum. And this transmission is Tremec, and that is the part number of this transmission. This is a close ratio transmission with a 266 first gear ratio, and it is the Magnum F, which is kind of the third different transmission that they have. There is the standard Magnum, the Magnum XL, which is primarily for Mustangs, and then the Magnum F, which is a new transmission that came out for I think it's like the 94 to 02 Camaros. This transmission, the reason I chose to go with the F transmission is the shifter location is further back than the regular Magnum. As you can see, like the back of the shifter is right at the back of the tail shaft, whereas with the regular Magnum, I believe it's like somewhere up in here. So that gives you, puts the shifter a little farther back, and hopefully will allow me to run a little bit shorter shifter handle, so I don't have to run that longer curved handle that you would typically run in a in a Camaro like this. The one thing that I didn't realize when I bought this is that you have to get a shifter specific for the T56. A regular Magnum kind of has its own line of shifters, and you can use that shifter in 3 different positions on standard Magnum. You cannot use those shifters on the Magnum F because it is specifically designed for the Camaro, which isn't a huge deal. You can run the stock shifter. That's a good shifter. I just decided to go with an aftermarket shifter for a few different reasons, but just keep that in mind when you're looking for shifters. A lot of the stuff that is advertised for the Magnum will not fit the Magnum F. You have to get something that is specific to the T56 transmission. But getting back to the parts, I want to give a big thanks to Joel at Grannas Racing. Check him out at grannasracing.com. He's the one who helped me kind of source all these parts. He's here in PA up in the Hollidaysburg area, and he was very helpful. Spent a lot of time emailing, answered a lot of my questions. Pretty much worked up a package for me, tranny, Bellhousing, Throwout bearing, different things like that, and was really good to work with. So if you get a chance and you're in the market for a 6-speed, make sure you check him out. Joel at Grannas Racing. Alright, so first set of parts we have, both of these pieces are from Detroit Speed. Since I'm putting this into a 71 Camaro, I was originally thinking of using like a Willwood break-in clutch pedal setup in the car, which is a really nice setup. But once I started looking into it, that really takes some dedicated fab work. It's not really something you can just kind of bolt in. So if you're building a car from the ground up, the Willwood kit's really nice, but there's probably a good amount of fabrication that's involved to make that work. These pieces from Detroit Speed are designed to use the stock pedal location and the stock push rod location. So you really don't have to do any major modifications. A little bit, won't explain why. The way that this works is, we have these 2 pieces. This is the Detroit Speed part number for this plate, and this is a plate which positions this piece on the firewall that will hold the master cylinder for the hydraulic clutch. This piece, this adapter piece, is that part number, and that is from Detroit Speed. And basically the way this works is this plate goes on the firewall. It bolts in behind the master cylinder, and that's what those 4 top holes are. They'll go basically where the brace is that holds the pedals. That's what this slides over. And then once that's in place, this is designed to be welded in. You can see how it's angled, so you do have to make on this bottom portion, you have to fill in that gap because it does stick off the firewall. So that's going to take a little bit of fabrication to make like edges for this plate so that it sits flat against the firewall and doesn't move around. They do recommend welding it because I guess you just have the pedal pressure on that. But so basically, once you put that pedal on the firewall, this goes on like that. And then this is designed for a Tilton master cylinder. Master cylinder I decided to use has a remote reservoir, and I'm doing this for a couple reasons. For one, the way that this mounts, it mounts this kind of sideways. So you either have to use some type of adapter to mount a reservoir on it. The other reason was that where it's going, there's a bar in the way there, so it's not always the easiest thing to get to. And if I put it high up on the firewall, it should be real easy to get to the reservoir. Let's see, what is the part number? This master cylinder is the 76 series, and it is the 76-750, which is the 3/4 inch bore. They sell these master cylinders in a bunch of different bore sizes, so make sure when you're looking into a hydraulic clutch setup that you're getting the right hydraulic master cylinder to go with your hydraulic release bearing. The other thing which doesn't really come in a kit is Tilton sells this plastic remote reservoir. Get it out of the box here. And here it is. Just a simple plastic reservoir. I believe that's a -4 tip on it, so you can get this reservoir allows for a couple different points. You can set up the I think you can set up the pressure line out of the front or out of the top, and then the reservoir goes in the top there. But they do sell this on Tilton's website. It isn't really advertised as going with this master cylinder, but it will work. And that part number is that right there. And all of this is going to make this throwout bearing work. The Tilton throwout bearing is this part, and this is my first time using a hydraulic throwout bearing, but from what I have seen, this is a really nice bearing. It seems like everything goes on pretty simple. You have the bearing, the stand that comes with it, that goes on, and basically once this stand goes on, it gets bolted on the transmission. There's those threads, and then there's threads inside the inside this throwout bearing, and basically you just screw it on till you can measure the right air gap between the bearing and the clutch. And then there's a pin that comes out into that hole, and you put the pin in, screw it in, tighten it down, and that's pretty much it. The air gap is set for the clutch. So I haven't gotten around to playing with any of this yet. Once we get we almost got the transmission tunnel pretty much done. Once we get to that and get that firewall piece mounted up, then we'll move on to the clutch and everything else that goes with it. With that, decided to use a pilot bearing. My application is a small block Chevy, so I originally was going to use a bronze pilot bushing, but I don't know, after doing some reading, it's kind of a 50-50, so I decided to go with the pilot bearing instead. And that is, let's see, that is the part number. And that's for your standard small block Chevy. Bolts, gotta have bolts to put everything together. These are the Flywheel Bolts, just your standard ARP Flywheel Bolts for small block Chevy. Same thing, these are the clutch bolts that hold the clutch to the flywheel. Just in case you're wondering, these Flywheel Bolts are, that is the part number for those. And then pressure plate bolts. Now these bolts, these are both the same type of bolts. These are the ARP bolts, and they're a 12-point 10 by 1.5 metric bolt. And the reason I got these, I was looking, when I got the transmission, there wasn't anything that really said what the bolt sizes were. So after going online and just doing a little bit of research, I found the bolt size for the bell housing so that the transmission can be bolted to the bell housing. And there was, I can't remember if it was a Tremec site or like Silver Sport Transmissions or one of those sites. They had a bolt set to bolt the transmission to the bell housing. I've always liked the ARP bolts, so I was looking around for them, and these ARP bolts are the same size as those bolts that they sell. So I just figured I'd rather go with the ARP bolts. The one nice thing is these come in 5-packs. So I got 2 5-packs. You only need 8 bolts for the bell housing to put the Magnum onto the QuickTime bell housing, but what comes in real handy is these bolts will also work to hold the transmission mount. There's 2 bolts back there, and they are perfect. These are the perfect size, perfect length to hold that transmission mount on. So if you get the 10 bolt pack, you have your 8 for your bell housing, and then 2 to hold on your transmission mount. 2 other things that were kind of neat that I got from Joel at Grannas Racing. This is like a standard alignment tool, the plastic ones that you get with a transmission. I've used those before, and I can say they never really worked. They just don't have a tight enough fit in the splines, and sometimes it can make it really difficult to put the transmission in. So Joel sells a nice machine steel clutch alignment tool. So I picked that up from him as well. Another thing that's real nice is this alignment plate. Anytime you put a clutch in a car, you have to make sure that everything is aligned correctly so that the input shaft is dead center of the clutch and the flywheel. There are some other plates out there that have a much smaller hole. This one is nice because it has a much larger hole to put the degree wheel on, or not the degree wheel, the dial indicator on. It just makes it a little bit easier to work with. The smaller ones, you have to really kind of angle the dial indicator and get it, in kind of a weird angle to take your measurements. This has just a nice bigger opening to work with. And this plate, this would be actually the side that goes to the bell housing. Basically, these pins just align it on the bell housing, and then you can put your dial indicator on the flywheel and check your run out on the clutch. Speaking of the clutch, we are going with a McLeod. It is the RXT series for the small block Chevy and T56 Magnum. Nice clutch. Sure you've probably seen these before in other videos. Your usual things you get with the McLeod dual disc. It is the ceramic discs, it's not the organic material. I was originally going to go with the organic, but after doing a little bit of research, I just saw some things about the organic that I wasn't quite happy with. A couple of people said they got like a little clutch slippage when it got hot and things like that. So years ago I had a manual transmission in this car, and it was a McLeod Clutch, and it was the ceramic discs, and that it worked just fine. It wasn't really real harsh or anything like that on the street. See if we can take a look here. The other thing, it is a solid hub, is not a sprung hub. Some people don't like that because I guess it makes more noise. You can get a little more clutch chatter through the drivetrain, and sometimes I don't know, it doesn't really bother me. My car is pretty loud, so you don't hear a whole lot inside the car anyhow. And I'm more concerned with how the clutch holds than, you know, a little bit of drivetrain noise. So that is that. That's the bottom side. All right, for Flywheel. The one thing that the McLeod Clutch does not come with a flywheel. I know that they used to do that, but it seems like they've got away from that, and they have that billet aluminum adapter plate, so you have to get a flywheel. I chose to go with the Ram flywheel again. Just doing a little bit of research, seemed like a nice piece, and some good reviews on it. There's a couple different options. You can go with aluminum flywheel with a steel insert, a regular weight flywheel, and this one, which is a steel flywheel, but it's lightweight. It is a zero balance lightweight flywheel. I can't remember the weight difference. Well, it says it's 25 pounds. So I want to say the standard weight flywheel was somewhere in the 30-35 pound range, maybe. I can't really say for sure, but that is the part number for the flywheel. I just decided to go with something a little bit lighter than a standard flywheel. As I said before, I had a manual transmission in the car previously, and that was aluminum flywheel, and it worked fine. I did notice though, like especially racing it, I really had to dump the clutch at like 6,000 RPM to keep it from kind of pulling the motor down a little bit. So I figured for street driving, a little bit more weight would be helpful. The Bellhousing is QuickTime Bellhousing, and again, it's going into a small block Chevy. So that is the number for that. And that's the small block Chevy to T56. Other parts that we have coming but aren't here yet. I got an MGW Shifter coming, and I'll maybe do a little video on that when that gets here. Just see how that works. We got to make some modifications to that. The shifter knob needs modified, and we got to bend the handle a little bit. I need it to be back towards me a little bit, so we're gonna have some machine work done on that to make it just make it work for what I need it to do. And I think that's about it for the parts. If you have any questions about any of the parts here, please let me know. Do us a favor, subscribe, like, hit that bell for notifications of new videos. And that's it for today. Talk to you later.